Welcome to the Digital Analytics Power Hour. 3 analytics pros and the occasional guest discussing digital analytics issues of the day. Find them on Facebook at facebook.com/analytics hour. And now, the Digital Analytics Power Hour.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Digital Analytics Power Hour. This is episode 25. You know, in a slight paraphrase of the REM classic, everybody tests sometimes. Have you ever asked yourself the question, why not all the time? I know we have. And that's what our episode is about today. So we're heading for testing excellence, straight as the CRO flies. I'm always joined by my intrepid co-hosts. That would be Tim Wilson, senior partner at Analytics Demystified.
Is this standardized testing? Because I'm
that's right.
Great at standardized testing.
No analyst left behind. And, of course, his sworn enemy in Ottawa, Canada, the double CEO of Napkin and Babbage Systems, Jim Kane.
Hi. Can you sing the whole episode, please? That was adorable.
I think we have you singing, Jim, on past ones that will never be topped. So,
okay, to help us in this conversation, who better to lend us a hand than our guest, the vizier of variations, the sultan of significance, the Nostradamus of null hypotheses. That's right, I'm talking about the one, the only, Kelly Wortham. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you.
I know that I made those titles up, so it was not Kelly's. Like, Kelly didn't tell us to read that. You know, other people
the money's on the way.
Yeah, thank you. No, let me give you some background about Kelly. Currently, she is the conversion rate optimization evangelist at EY in their analytics and strategic advisory practice, and she's leading the charge on optimization there. Prior to that, she led the A/B testing program at Dell, and she's been out in the industry and in this space for 15 years. We're very excited to get such a seasoned professional in our field, and in this field specifically around A/B testing, conversion rate optimization. So it's a real pleasure to have you here. So let's dive right into this. You know, we can go down either question A or question B. So which one do you guys want to start with? No.
Can we do both? Can we ask one person A and one person B and have them answer simultaneously?
Well, I think that's a good first question for Kelly. How would that test work? I think tonight we're going to be worried.
You guys make it so easy.
We're going to be worried a lot about interaction effects because we're going to be all over the place. But let's get in there. I'd love to start by talking about the process of setting up and running a testing program. I think the world is sold on the concept of testing, right? Everyone believes in it. Everybody wants to do it. And whoever's doing a little wants to do more. And whoever's not doing any wants to do some. But it's pretty rare to find organizations that are doing a really good job. So I'd like to throw that out first is what goes into building out a really good testing program, and what would be the first steps you might take?
Oh, good. Start with the easy questions.
Yeah, of course. Softballs, right over the middle.
Right there. Yeah, low-hanging fruit. So there is no simple answer for how you do it right. There's a lot of answers for what you shouldn't do. But I would say the number one thing that I see organizations that want to get into testing do wrong is that they fail to do the upfront planning and creation of just the simple questions that you need to ask. You know, what are the business problems that we're trying to solve, just like you would do with any analytics problem. You want to do the same thing with your testing program. And you need to determine, you know, what is the goal of the program? What are we trying to fix? What are we trying to address? What are we trying to improve? And you need to ask all those questions and get all those answers before you determine what your program is going to do, before you even choose what tool you're going to use to get there. And often I see those questions being asked 1-2 years out once the program has stopped, you know, delivering these massive returns on those initial low-hanging fruit. So that's the first thing I think is crucial, just like it is in analytics. I think it's crucial in testing. The second thing I think is really important is to not just focus on the low-hanging fruit, on fixing the things that your analytics team or maybe the business identifies, hey, this is broken. And, you know, you can see in the data it's broken. Just fix it. You don't necessarily need to expend your limited resources on potentially expensive A/B testing when you can just go fix something. So you have to determine when you should test and when you should just go and fix. And a lot of times people come out the door. I mean, there was even the book written, always test, always be testing, ABT, right? And I think that sets you up for failure because, you do have limited resources and people and traffic, as well as, of course, finances. And if you can target those testing efforts to the areas that make sense where you actually need to get an answer because the analytics can't give you that answer, then you have a better result out the gate and you have a longer tail for success with your program.
So have you seen cases where basically analytics is clicking along and they're just kind of keeping a running log of these are the things that can't be answered with analytics or can't meaningfully be answered with analytics, and kind of using that to build up a case to say this is not just a case, but some level of focus to testing? Is that one of the approaches, or no?
That's utopia, right? And I have seen it. It is rare, but it requires close alignment between analytics and testing, or the possibility that even the analytics and testing are within the same organization. But there has to be this organizational consensus that analytics is to answer questions and that analytics won't be able to answer all the questions. And that requires, honestly, for the analytics folks to be kind of honest as well, I guess, because nobody wants to say, hey, I can't answer that question. But when they work really closely with the testing team, it's not, I can't answer that question. It's, hey, I need help, right? I'm going to phone a friend. I'm going to phone the testing program, and we're going to get that answer to you together, and they work at it together. So you have this beautiful backlog of here's all the questions that we're asking in the analytics team. Anything that they can answer, we can go fix or go do. Anything that they can't answer, they make a recommendation to go test, and based on the analytics, they make a recommendation of how to test it and what the hypotheses might be and what those recipes might look like. And then you have a much stronger test design and a much better chance of getting successful results.
So heading right off on a tangent there, you were talking about the analytics and the testing team. So getting started for teams that certainly analysts want to be doing testing, especially if they feel like they're in a rut. So do you see it as typically you really need to say, we're going to do testing, we need to have a testing organization that is parallel to the analytics organization, we need to staff that independently, or can there be a dipping the toes in the water by saying we're gonna get a designer from, a little bit of support from our creative team or our agency, and we're going to get a developer who's kind of interested, and we're going to have an analyst kind of dip their toe in. So do you see that as kind of
right?
Typically you have to say, look, this is a separate group that needs to be established?
Yes. I mean, how many times do we see organizations willing to throw money at tools, software, but not for people, right? Your people are your most important resource.
Well, the tools claim that's all you need, right? Isn't that where I'll always be testing?
Right.
Optimizely is like, just put a little snippet on the site and start testing. You're done.
That's right. Yeah. It's all good. Anybody can do it.
It's a WYSIWYG. Just drag it around.
It's amazing. Yeah, I get that a lot. I get a lot of course, the testing tools do their sales to, the hippos, right? They go to the executives and they show them how easy this is to use, and they convince the executives that this is the right tool and that we don't need to hire really talented people because even I could do it, right? And then what happens is, well, yes, that's true. The out-of-box functionality is super easy to use, and, my fifth grader could probably figure it out. But it doesn't work on your site, right? Because, you have some custom implementations requirements that end up making you do that all in DOM manipulation JavaScript. And, okay, now we need to hire a developer. And, oh, by the way, the test designs that we start throwing at you are a little bit more complex than just, moving things around the page. So now we need a designer because, we want to change more than just the location of this banner. And as it gets more and more complex, you need more and more resources, and you start borrowing throughout the org, and it's very disjointed, and people get jealous because you're taking their people, and it just goes crazy. But if you start the whole thing and you say, look, I need one developer, I need one designer, and I need an analyst, and I need a project manager. And I'm starting with those people, and it should be led by somebody who's familiar with A/B testing. Start there. You can even use 0.5 FTE resources if you need to, so that you can build a dotted line team. But don't think that you can start testing just by saying, hey, I'm going to take this analyst that's part of my digital analytics team, and I'm going to give this person testing, and I'm going to put them over testing, and everything is going to be great, because that's just not enough. It's not just one thing. It's not just, being an expert in, one piece of the puzzle here won't help you solve the puzzle.
So is a testing expert or a conversion rate optimization professional, is that one of those you hit a certain level as a digital analyst and you're just kind of wired that way and that's something you graduate to? Or is that really, in your estimation, a totally separate discipline that bumps into measurement?
That's a fantastic question.
Don't encourage it.
And that's not me. Yeah, that's not me just hesitating. That's a really good question. I think it's a little bit of both. I think it is possible for any digital analyst, and I am making a distinction there because there is a difference, as we all know, in the type of data that you have in the analytics and digital analytics. So I think it's possible for any digital analyst to learn and change their mindset in a way to really fully embrace what's possible in A/B testing, multivariate testing, conversion rate optimization, whatever you want to call it. I think it's possible to get there. It's also possible to start there, whereas I don't think in digital analytics that you could say that you could have an expert in digital analytics that's also an expert in testing that's never touched testing. In testing, you could be an expert in testing and not have a digital analytics background, which is, I think that makes it unique because it's really more about understanding a lot of technical stuff, the implementation stuff, the back-end stuff. But as long as you can read a report, a readout, a deep dive analytics, and you can understand the very tiny basic elements of statistics, whatever you took in, stats 101 or whatever. If you got that level of understanding, you're okay, and you can really become an expert in your field. I don't think that's the case in digital. In digital, it's just so much broader. You have to do so much to become an expert. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm surprised, though, at the direction. Because, again, testing to me isn't harder than analysis, but it does seem like a level up, And so I was surprised to hear you say that it's possible to get into a career in testing without ever kind of becoming or having to start off as being good at working with data.
I will tell you that at Dell, I had a team of absolute rock stars. I still miss every single one of them, and I want to work with them again. And I'm talking about on the testing side, not the analytics that supported the testing. And on the testing side, I had 3 that came to us from the analytics side that were analytics whiz kids that just really loved supporting the testing team and decided that they wanted to start managing testing programs. And I had 2 who had absolutely no analytics background. One of them was a certified Scrum Master, and the other one actually came to us from IT. And, he was just fascinated with the stuff that we used to ask him to do to help us make tests happen. And he, came over and ended up managing some of the most important work that we had. So, 2 people with no background, not only in analytics, but no background in digital analytics, who were fantastic, and 3 who were. So, and all 5 of them, I would say, are now experts in the field of A/B testing. So it doesn't help, sure, but I also think sometimes it can get in the way because sometimes, the folks that don't come from digital analytics, their minds are a little bit broader. They ask bigger questions sometimes because they're not limited by what they think they can answer with data.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I've always said kind of a testing capability is part of an analyst toolkit. But I like your point, Kelly, that someone could go into testing and optimization specifically without necessarily building 5 years of competency in digital analytics. And I think that's something a lot of organizations probably don't think about or might miss when thinking about how to build their programs. And a lot of times, you've been kind of hitting some of the skill requirements and things like that. people with a real affinity and an understanding of user experience design and those kinds of things can be phenomenal at proposing and ideating around really great testing opportunities. Whereas to your point, I'm just fascinated. Your last point was really good, which was we do sometimes get stuck in the data and we know what data we can or can't trust out of our tools. And so we tend to work from there and use that as our box to live in. So that's really cool.
I'm all excited about the Scrum Master, thinking, there's so much that if you had an agile mindset, if you're coming in with an agile mindset, that does lend itself to testing more. Where it
very well,
it does seem like that's kind of congruent with the concepts. Whereas sometimes with testing, it's like, oh, I need to run this until I have overthinking. I guess overthinking. Like
I need
we have
this
to come up
much
with the perfect
data,
design.
right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, because the analyst is looking at it from a statistical perspective, and they're saying, look, you've only reached 85% confidence, and you need to run this test this much longer, and therefore we don't get any answers. The person with no analytics background is going, dude, we're not saving lives. Before we ran this test, it was 50-50. Now it's 85%. Woohoo! Let's make a decision and move. And it allows you to move a lot faster. It can be a little bit more risky too, but again, we're not saving lives here. We're talking about very, very minimal risk. And sometimes I think analysts can, we're kind of used to somebody asks you a question and they give you 6 weeks to give them an answer, and that's not always the case with testing. They're like, okay, you've got a 3-week window, you get this much traffic, give me an answer. And the folks in the testing industry kind of get used to that. And, you can call it lower standards, you can call it whatever you want. But at the end of the day, we're both giving answers. They're just, different types of answers, maybe with different level of confidence. And maybe you don't want to put as much weight on the answers with a lower level of statistical confidence, but at least it's better than, that coin toss.
I was actually talking to somebody within the last week where she was saying, no, well, yeah, you need 95% confidence. I'm like, I'm not a testing expert, but I think I've talked to people who are like, these are people in marketing and it's messy, and that's setting a really high bar where you're going to have to collect a lot of data for a long time on a fairly substantial change. I had a professor years ago who was like, come on, guy, like let's live, we're in the real world. We're not just in academia. We can drop that a little bit.
Right. Well, this is really weird analogy, but, forgive me, whatever. My kids are learning about it in school. They all said that with the advent of like the washing machine and the dishwasher and all these things that people wouldn't have to do as much housework. But statistically, that's not what happened. People actually did more. You washed your dishes more often. You washed your clothes more often because it was easier to do. So it actually increased the amount of work. Ironically, what we do with data, the moment we put those statistics out there and we tell people, hey, you want to reach 95% confidence, and we think, oh, good, we can just, leave it and go. That's not what happens, right? People are like, oh, if I let it run a little bit longer, I'll get to that level of confidence, and it's ridiculous. There's no need for it. There was an organization that I had the chance to work with since joining EY that created a algorithm to determine what their statistical confidence should be for each and every test they launched based on the potential risk and the potential impact. And they said, look, if it's low risk and the impact is low, then confidence can be low. If the risk is low and the impact is high, positive or negative, then we can also keep the statistical confidence kind of low because we're not going to hurt ourselves, and there's a chance that we can get a good answer quick and go.
And there's a cost to continuing running it.
Exactly. That's fewer tests that you can run, right? And if I have something where the risk is high, now I'm going to jack up my statistical confidence and the requirements, with it, and make that test run longer because, there's a reason. Maybe it's in your checkout funnel or something, and so the risk of being wrong is higher. And I just thought that was the first time that I had talked with an organization that was a little bit more laissez-faire.
Were they a retailer? What kind of were they a retailer, or were they in a?
We can neither confirm nor deny that the company we're discussing is Netflix. So to repeat, we can neither confirm nor deny that Ernst
All right,
Young does
Jim.
testing for Netflix.
This is classic Jim. He always throws this in there, and then we have to put like Monty Python intermission music over it. So you are not required to answer the question.
I'll retract the question.
That's right.
That seems like a really mature. That doesn't seem like a concept that was a junior analyst posited. That seems like a really sharp executive that said, "Well, shit, let's not treat all things the same."
Yeah, it was an MIT graduate statistician who said, we don't need to do this. And they were able to build out the model and actually
MIT.
prove it.
Tim,
I know, right?
Don't even. Tim, of course, went to MIT.
Go
so
Beavers. Go Beavers.
He's just fun. He's taking that as validation of all of his testing efforts over the years. I can do it. Okay, so this is great. I don't know to what extent, Kelly, you want to dive into the weeds of testing, but I think our listeners probably would get a lot of just things like, hey, what steps go into setting up a good test? Or, hey, we've been talking about this confidence and those kinds of things. How do you decide which tests to run? Those are more tactical concerns, but I think would be interesting. And again, I don't want to sort of ask you to like spill all the goods, but at the same time, I think everybody would love to hear and we can compare notes. Because, I only test to 95% confidence and that's it. So I just learned something. Anyway, no, back to business.
Well, yeah. And throwing on top of that, to me, one of the things is I got into testing and I'm not heavily into it now. Like the thing that I feel like people miss the most often is the number of roles. Like we touched on it, but if we talk through kind of what the pieces are and why, analytics is pretty low risk you're not going to break the user experience by botching a data warehouse export from Adobe Analytics.
Sure.
Whereas testing seems like that does add complexity. So when it comes to kind of the nuts and bolts and what goes into a test, like who the people and the skills and the role, like you'd mentioned in one of your blog posts, all of a sudden you need creative approval because yes, some of your potential consumers are seeing a different experience. Analytics doesn't have to worry about that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it of course, all depends on the complexity of the test you're doing. But the most complex tests we've run, we've had to get approvals and insights and ideas from, the pricing team, the legal team, the brand team, of course, your business owners, the design team, UX, because they're not always the same. And then, of course, you've got the analytics, the developers, and the QA team, and all of those people. In my experience, the best test managers are cat herders, and they really are spending all of their time getting all of those different pieces and all of those different people aligned about the goals of the test, and keeping everybody in lockstep to move things forward. And again, it totally depends on the complexity of the test, but if you do have to get all of those different people to touch the test at one stage or the other, it makes for a much more complex upfront development before you can even get the test launched. But it also, on the back end, as you're analyzing it and you want to give a readout, you have a whole bunch of egos in the room that have opinions, that had very strong opinions probably, and some of them you're going to have to tell them their baby's ugly, and it's not easy to do. So not only do you have to be a cat herder, you have to be a diplomat. So it's a very unique position in my experience anyway in the industry.
So a bar manager would probably make a good testing team lead.
Yes.
That is insane.
He shoots, he scores.
Harkening back to episode 2. So how do you run into do you actually shy away from tests that are copy changes that would require legal? The legal's one I haven't run into because the tests I've never kind of done offer or pricing or that sort of testing? Is that something you regularly see on teams, that there is a legal review for any tests or for certain types of tests?
So some of my clients are in, the
financial services or
financial
services.
Exactly, financial services, healthcare, pharmaceutical, those types of organizations, and everything they do goes through legal, which makes it very, very challenging and dramatically limits the amount of testing that they actually are able to do. You asked an interesting question, though, which was, would you avoid, if you had the opportunity to run a test, say you're like I was back at Dell, obviously not everything had to run through legal, but some of the most important tests we did have to run through legal. And so you ask, would I avoid them? And the answer is an emphatic no. I believe you need to divide your traffic into sort of a strategic lane that is saved for those big important tests that may have a longer upfront development time and run time. And then another, the majority of your traffic, depending on how much traffic you have, maybe 75-80% of your traffic, you're running those continuous optimization, operational type tests. But, pricing elasticity is an amazing test to run. Offer type can be incredibly powerful. But so can, subscription rate offers, not just offers, but, different ways of illustrating the same offers. And all of that is going to require, pricing and legal, and just have a lot more hoops to jump through.
So I'd like to explicitly call out something that's happening right now unless I'm wrong, and then tell me I'm full of shit. But
sure,
cool. You'll not be the first person to do it to me, probably today.
Tonight.
Tonight. So a lot of people who are more junior, like newer members of my team, when we talk about testing, to them it's red button versus green button. Or copy A versus copy B. And the conversation that you and Tim are having is much more sophisticated than that. So every aspect of a user's web experience can be tested. And so you're talking about price, and you're talking about copy, and you're talking about offer, like it's not red button versus blue button. Could you make a list of, I want to get into testing and wrap my head around it? What are the key types of things that are going to be tested, and hopefully touch on behavioral targeting as well, because that's my favorite.
Sure. So I'm going to get there, and don't bring me back if I get too far off. But I wanted to say one thing, because before we got off onto the last discussion, you asked one of the original questions of what do you need to do to have a successful test, which I think fits nicely with this question that you just asked. And I wanted to answer that I really feel passionately that the number one thing you need to do when you're thinking of your test, regardless of whether it's pricing elasticity or even button color, is to determine what it will mean if your results are X, Y, or Z. So you've gone through the effort of saying this is the question, this is the goal, whatever, and this is our hypothesis, and here's our different recipes. Now you have, hopefully you have a KPI, and you've said, this is the main thing we're going to focus on. And you may even have some secondary metrics that you want to make sure they don't go down dramatically, right? But you're just going to focus on that KPI, and you're going to say, if B is higher in, maybe conversion rate than A, it means this. And we will take this action. If C is greater than A, but not B, it means this, and we will do this. So you create this huge, long matrix that says all the different possible results of your test. And the process of doing that, you will learn very quickly that you don't need A, B, C, and D, or maybe you need E and F as well, because you haven't set up your test in a way so that each recipe gives you a different answer. And if you don't do that, then you'll have a result, but you won't know why. And if you don't know why, you can't act, and then you've just wasted everyone's time and resources. Did I explain that okay? Does it make sense?
Speechless. You're just music to my... Well, because what you're saying is, hey, before you go and do a bunch of work, why don't you think through exactly how it could play out, instead of saying, hey, let's do the work, and we assume at the end of the day there's going to be a magic answer and a clear way forward. It's saying it's a hell of a lot cheaper to sit with a whiteboard and kind of play out
Yes.
the reasonable set of scenarios and saying, is this going to make us behave differently in a meaningful way tomorrow than we do today?
Right.
So I am all for, because it does. It's the evil cousin of technology being just the solution is, just do stuff and then expect that, just envision that at the end of the day, the answer is going to roll out and it's going to be crystal clear and it's going to point a clear way forward, as opposed to saying, how about if we just try to draw a map and see where this might go?
I think it was 2 or 3 exchanges ago, Lynn Lanphier from Best Buy said, "Is the juice worth the squeeze?" And I will never forget that phrase. It has totally changed the way I respond to every business request that comes my way. It's not just, is this going to be worth our time and effort? It's, are you going to make a decision based on this information?
And
if you're not, we don't need this recipe.
Yeah, and depending on the organization, that answer could be different. So
Absolutely.
It's not always the most obvious thing. And it also puts to bed kind of that concept that you hear sometimes, like, there's no such thing as a failed test, just learnings. And it's like, sort of like, just get out there and run tests willy-nilly. And it's better to have a plan. Definitely see the end before you start.
It is. And, there are a lot of purists out there that do believe passionately that the purpose of testing is learning. But
can you give us some names specifically?
Yeah. Let me just start rattling off a few.
I mean, come on. She already threw all.
I think that's the purpose of analytics, right? Analytics helps you learn. Optimization lets you do. And if you already have analytics to learn, you don't need your optimization program to learn too. You just need your optimization program to do. And sometimes your optimization program can provide evidence to support something you want to do, to, fight the good battle, to stand up against team X or Y at the organization. In that case, it really is a learning, but it's a learning with an intended action. Whether or not you achieve it or not is, up to the organization. But I think all tests should put on the glasses, the intent of what action are we going to take based on these results.
I love that. But let's get to the question that I think everyone listening has been waiting for up until now. Taguchi or full factorial? No, I'm just kidding.
I am deeply, deeply sorry for all of my Adobe friends and families, but I am not a fan of Taguchi. I am MVT only, full factorial. And in fact, if you think back to my description of what I think you should do with every test as you're designing your A, B, C, D, E, F, I'm actually describing a full factorial A/B test.
What I love about that right there is that was actually a joke, but that was a very insightful answer. So, thank you. I was like, I'll throw a funny one over them. And it was like, wow, that's pretty good. That's great. Usually that question comes up when somebody in the room wants to seem smart and has no idea.
I see. Yes. So
that's typically what I see brought to bear.
Let me answer your other question about tests, about button tests, or what tests, or how do you know it's a good test, or what test should you test?
That was one of Jim's questions. We just kind of humor him. We just kind of try to move on after he's asked a question. But if you want to be that kind of guest, then go for it.
No, I think it's a good question because in my experience, organizations that are new to testing, that's the first thing they do. They're like, oh, well, let's test our calls to action, or let's try this banner or that banner, or, let's use behavioral targeting to determine what we're going to put on the banner. And it's not that those are bad. It's that you're not asking the right questions. Why do you want to change the button color? What evidence do you have? What data do you have? What voice of customer research have you done that says that the color you have is not good? So if you can come back to me and you can say, look, we've looked at template A, B, and C on our site, and they use different calls to action, and we noticed that in template C, people click on the call to action more. And when we look at the difference, version C has a different color button, but it's also just higher contrast versus the rest of the site. So we think it's drawing more attention, more eyeballs to the call to action, and people are more likely to click. So it's not that we want to test changing the colors of our calls to action buttons. We want to jack up the contrast in some way, and we think the best way to do that is to change the color. And by doing this, we are testing the theory that higher contrast calls to action will drive more click-through. Now, if you run that test, and it's the same test as a button color test, but on the other side of the test, you haven't learned that blue is better than green, which is a bunch of BS, as we all know. Instead, you've learned why it's better. You've learned that high contrast is better than low contrast. Or maybe you've learned that all caps is better than not all caps, or whatever the situation is to draw the eyes. And it's because the truth of the matter is, I will tell you this, every single time, every organization that I have ever done any testing with has run a button test, it has won. Because change draws eyes. It's simple, right?
Yep.
So now you need to, instead of doing that, you need to have that business case up front to design a better hypothesis and better recipes. And, you need to know up front, what is your results matrix? What does it mean if X, Y, or Z happens?
And that's why you get teams saying, we've used A/B testing to improve our web results by 4,000%. And then they go look at their main metrics and they're the exact same as they were before, is because those kinds of changes regress right away to the mean. It's just that initial look and feel. And that's really key.
That's right.
That's great. All right. So as much as I really am not liking that we're getting to this moment, we really have to start to wrap up. And before we kind of do a round robin and just sort of talk about maybe the interesting things we heard or parting shots, whatever, Kelly, I am so glad you came on to the show. I think this is such a great topic. And, I think I speak for all of us. You covered it with such aplomb. And, your deep expertise is very evident. So I think our listeners are going to have probably lots of great questions. So obviously you should probably follow Kelly Wortham on her Twitter account at Kelly Wortham, which will probably then force her to tweet more. And
I was going to say.
And
Dang
of course, you'll get that big digital analytics power hour Twitter bump. You know how that happens. No, I'm just kidding. No, anyways, so let's do a round robin and do some closing thoughts on this show. I feel like we've just scratched the surface, though. So we need to do this. We need to do probably 2 more hours together. And we'll bring some examples next time, and we can pick them apart.
I feel like we've been saying we need to talk about testing from episode 5 onward, and I think we've proved that it could almost be every other episode. So I think scratch the surface is a good way to put it. I've also learned that maybe if I shut up and let Jim ask a question once or twice, that they'll actually be, labeled good questions with, they'll at least get insightful responses, even if the questions are still horrible.
Kelly and I have been practicing that question all week. I'm just glad I got it on the first attempt.
Yeah, this has been, I feel like we bounced around a lot, and every time Kelly was talking, I had wow, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. That's a really good point. And I have 7 other questions. So, yeah, I feel like it's, on the one hand, you could walk away from this being really intimidated by testing, which is probably not our intention. On the other hand, it's going in with eyes wide open that, don't buy, if the tool says just get the tool and the rest will come, well, that's a load of crap. There's a lot of thought needs to go into it. And yeah, my biggest, I say takeaway, because I feel like it's just because it's such music to my ears, think about what you're doing before you just do it. It's not Nike from a just go execute and good things will come. It's actually makes sense to put some thought and planning into what you're doing, why you're doing it, who you need to help you do it. And don't shy away from stuff just because it's going to require legal approval. Still could be high impact and be worth the investment.
Which is not to say that Nike doesn't have an excellent testing program. Because they do.
Yeah, it was more a reference to their outbound consumer slogan, not to the company.
So this was a fun chat, and to me, that's really all it was this time. And I think we need, like Tim was saying, we need another 2 hours. We did a really good job building a baseline today for people who are new to testing. I think the only particular takeaway that I'd share, because I'd never thought of it before today, is that we talk often about how hard it is to find an analytics professional. You know, like I'm a recruiter or I'm a company that wants an analytics person.
Sure.
I wonder, how much harder it is to turn over a rock and find a testing person.
Lightning in a jar.
Yeah, it's you either build them or they're not a lot.
Yeah.
Definitely not a lot.
Yeah, very challenging.
Those are my big takeaways. This was fun. Let's do some more.
Yeah, and for me, I think definitely one of the things I'm taking away is thinking a little bit harder about how I hew to kind of the doctrine of have to have this confidence level. I kind of joked about it, but typically we'll always look for a specific confidence and haven't historically kind of looked at it from the perspective of impact or complexity or, so those kinds of things in terms of how you might be able to like raise or lower confidence. So I think that's really, that was something that was kind of new for me. So that was awesome. And yeah, I reiterate a third time, just how little I feel like we were able to cover. And so, but that just means we need to do more of the same. So that's good. And I don't know, Kelly, any parting thoughts from you or?
Well, it's a little ironic. I feel almost like you guys all set me up for this, and you don't even know it. But I have a twice monthly teleconference group that discusses, just one piece of the topics that we covered tonight each time in an hour-long conversation. And all of you are, of course, invited to join us, as any of your listeners. Just shoot me an email at kelly.wortham@ey.com, and I'll add you to the invite. For those of you who have been to Exchange, the whole idea was to take the Exchange huddle session and pull it into a teleconference. So you have people from all over the industry, from all different areas of different verticals and different levels of sophistication. Some people just building programs, some people I would call best in class, and they all get on the phone together and we just, pick a topic and kind of do a deep dive on it and learn from each other. And it's really powerful. And as you mentioned, feels like you just scratched the surface in this, 30-minute conversation. It's really nice to have a full hour to just pick one topic and dive deep. So,
did you actually invite the three of us to crash your nice conference call?
I absolutely did. The three of you and all your listeners.
That is
Great.
awesome. No, that is such a great resource, and I think you will probably get a few emails from folks, and probably from me also, wanting to get a chance to listen in on the next one of those. And so, if you're listening, that is something for definitely rewind that part, get Kelly's email, and I think you said it was kelly.wortham@ey.com.
That's right.
Now,
Okay.
for all of you who rewound
Perfect.
it, Michael just restated it for you, so now you need to
No,
not
you
rewind
don't
it
have
again.
to. Just
If
try to
you're,
put it
if
in
you're
there
really slow.
one more time. Dial 1-800.
100.
So crazy how fast the time went tonight. I don't remember recently one of these going so quickly. Anyway, this is great. Again, if you're listening and you want to get more information or follow up or have questions, I think we all know who you need to talk to or whose twice monthly teleconference you need to join. But definitely
Come to our Facebook page and tell us how that went.
Yeah, exactly. No, definitely hit us up on our Facebook page or Twitter or on the Measure Slack, and we'll do our best to get Kelly involved with Measure Slack and stuff like that, although she seems pretty busy based on just even how long it took us to get her to get on the show. Part of that was our fault, but man, was it worth the wait. So, Kelly, thank you once again. For everyone listening, we'd love to hear from you, and get out there, formulate a great plan, and then go test against that plan and really make things happen. Don't just learn stuff. All right. Well, Obviously, for my co-hosts, Tim Wilson and Jim Kane, this is Michael Helbling. Keep analyzing.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to join the conversation on Facebook or Twitter. We welcome your comments and questions. Facebook.com/Analytics Hour or at Analytics Hour on Twitter.
So smart guys wanted to fit in, so they made up a term called analytics. Analytics don't work.
And what you'll need to do is just interrupt Tim whenever you need to talk. Jim Kane is the person who then goes after Tim Wilson for talking too much, so I don't have to. That's kind of his role and function on the show. If you get a loony and a toonie, you got some money.
Holy jump, eh?
Hey.
I'm getting like the massive head shake from Helbling. It's like, Tim, we're cutting that whole section out. What'd I do?
Search Discovery is a great place where I feel free to express myself.
I neither confirmed nor denied it.
Yeah.
I think we are in a defensible position, man.
That was a good one.
Rock flag into Gucci.